Good afternoon.
You're right up on it.
We're going to start out this afternoon with Keisha James, who is a Quinawampanoag. And we wanted to explain to you that we have an interpreter, ASL interpreter on stage, who is not wearing a mask because they can't wear masks, because you can't do ASL without your face. Believe me. Very important. So we have this amazing crew of 4 people here today who are going to be doing the interpretation for the live stream. We're so grateful that they came here to be with us, and we just wanted to explain again why there's no masking here. And now we want to introduce Keisha James.
Good afternoon, brothers, sisters, and siblings. Once again, on the 4th Thursday in November, United American Indians of New England and those who support us are gathered on this hill to observe a National Day of Mourning. Today marks the 50th anniversary of our being here in all kinds of weather to mourn our ancestors and speak the truth about our history. Those who started National Day of Mourning could not have envisioned that generations would still be here, year after year, carrying on this tradition. Many of the elders who stood on this hill and organized the first day of mourning are no longer with us, but we feel their spirits guiding us today. We are thinking today of so many and mourning their loss. 51 Thanksgivings ago, my grandfather and a Quinawampanoag named Wamsuta Frank James was invited to address a gathering celebrating the 350th anniversary of the arrival of the Pilgrims. When asked by the organizers to provide an advance copy of the speech he planned to deliver, Wamsuta agreed. When they saw his speech, the planners told him he could speak only if he were willing to offer false praise of the Pilgrims. According to the organizers of the event, the theme of the celebration is brotherhood, and anything inflammatory would be out of place. The organizers even offered to write a speech for him, one which would better fit with their settler colonialist narrative. He refused to have words put into his mouth, and National Day of Mourning came into being as a result of that refusal. Instead of speaking at the banquet, he and members of at least 25 tribes, as well as a sprinkling of non-native allies, gathered here on this hill and observed the National Day of Mourning in 1970. That first year, my grandfather never did get a chance to deliver his speech on this hill, although some who don't actually know our history say he did. Maybe 100 or 200 Native people and allies gathered, depending on which person is giving their recollection of this day. Indigenous people from this region and members of the Boston Indian Center organized and were joined by others, including some famous members of the American Indian movement. They spoke about the Pilgrim invasion and issues throughout Indian country, marched around Plymouth, boarded the Mayflower II replica, and even buried Plymouth Rock. In the 1970s, UAIN demanded the return of Wampanoag artifacts, including bones, that were being held by the gravedigger settlers at the Pilgrim Society Museum. At the 4th National Day of Mourning, the bones were returned to my grandfather and given a proper burial. In 1972, the police followed us around with police dogs, and a young woman, Judy Mendez, who had a U.S. flag draped around her shoulders, was attacked and arrested. Over the years, we repeatedly disrupted the Pilgrim Progress Parade, a tradition we continued until 1996. The following year, in 1997, we were blocked on Leiden Street and arrested without warning when we simply tried to march peacefully. The resulting defense of the Plymouth 25 led to the National Day of Mourning plaque you see here on Coles Hill and the Metacom plaque we will visit when we march. Consistently, our organization has not collaborated with the Pilgrims or their institutions, whether museums or the Mayflower Society or the Plymouth 400 International Colonizer celebrations this year. We have our own story to tell in our own way. In addition to speaking about what is happening in this region and in the U.S., we have consistently sought to present issues that Indigenous people are facing internationally, not just here, because we are indeed all related. So what really happened at the first Thanksgiving, or what some of us call the first Thanks-taking? According to popular myth, the Pilgrims, seeking religious freedom, landed on Plymouth Rock. The Indians welcomed them with open arms and then conveniently faded into the background, and everyone lived happily ever after. The end. Here is the truth. First, the Pilgrims are glorified and mythologized because the circumstances of the first permanent English colony in North America, Jamestown, were too ugly to hold up as an effective national myth. There are important efforts now to teach school children about the African slaves held hostage at Jamestown, but no curriculum seems to want to teach kids about settler cannibalism. Pilgrims and Indians are a much more marketable story. Second, the Pilgrims came here as part of a commercial venture. They didn't need religious freedom. They already had that back in the Netherlands. The Mayflower Compact was merely a group of white men who wanted to ensure they would get a return on their investment. When they arrived, on Outer Cape, by the way, not that pebble down the hill, one of the first things the Pilgrims did was to rob Wampanoag graves at Cornhill and steal as much of their winter provisions of corn and beans as they were able to carry. The writings of the colonists themselves describe these actions taking place. The next part of the mythology is true. Some Wampanoag ancestors did welcome the Pilgrims and save them from starvation. And what did we get in return for this kindness? Genocide, the theft of our lands, slavery, starvation, and never-ending oppression. It is also important to remember that the first official Thanksgiving did not take place in 1621, when the Pilgrims had a harvest time meal provided largely by the Wampanoag. Plymouth Colony Governor William Bradford declared a Pilgrim Day of Thanks in 1623 to give thanks for the abundance of the harvest and for their God protecting them from what he called the ravages of the savages, meaning the ravages of us, the people whose land and lives they stole. In 1637, Governor Winthrop of the Massachusetts Bay Colony declared a day of Thanksgiving to celebrate the massacre of over 700 Pequot men, women, and children on the banks of the Mystic River in Connecticut. William Bradford of the Plymouth Colony wrote of this event, "Those that escaped the fire were slain with the sword, some hewed to pieces, others run through with their rapiers. They thus destroyed about 400 at this time. It was a fearful sight to see them thus frying in the fire. Horrible was the stink and scent thereof, but the victory seemed a sweet sacrifice, and they gave their prayers thereof to God, who had so wrought for them this victory." Subsequent slaughters of indigenous people would be celebrated by a day of Thanksgiving, and yet the history books call us the savages. So why does any of this matter? It is simple. When people perpetuate the myth of Thanksgiving, they are not only erasing our genocide, but also celebrating it. But we did not simply fade into the background as the Thanksgiving myth says. We have survived and thrived. We have persevered. The very fact that you are here is proof that we did not vanish. Our very presence frees this land from the lies of the history books and the myth makers. We will remember and honor all of our ancestors in the struggle who went before us. We will speak truth to power, as we have been doing since the first day of mourning in 1970. That first day of mourning in 1970 was a powerful demonstration of Native unity. It has continued for all these years as a powerful demonstration of Indigenous unity and of the unity of all people who speak truth to power. Sadly, many of the conditions that prevailed in Indian country in 1970 still prevail today. In 1970, our average life expectancy was just 44 years. Today, it is up, but for Native men, it is still 6 years below that of white people. Native women's death rate has increased 20% over the past 15 years. In 1970, the average Native yearly income was $4,347. In 2019, 20% of Native people still earned under $5,000 per year. In 1970, our suicide and infant mortality rates were among the highest in the country. This has not changed. We all know that racism is alive and well. All of us are struggling under the oppression of a capitalist system which forces people to make a bitter choice between heating and eating. We will continue to gather on this hill until corporations and the U.S. military stop polluting the earth, until we dismantle the brutal apparatus of mass incarceration. We will not stop until the oppression of our two-spirit siblings is a thing of the past. When unhoused people have homes, when children are no longer taken from their parents and locked in cages, when the Palestinians reclaim the homeland and the autonomy Israel has denied them for the past 70 years, when no person goes hungry or is left to die because they have little or no access to quality health care, when insulin is free, when union busting is a thing of the past. Until then, the struggle will continue. In 1970, we demanded an end to the Bureau of Indian Affairs. It is still a demand today. Native nations should not need federal oversight to govern ourselves or take control of our own lands. I hope you will stand with the Mashpee as Mashpee continues to be under threat in the waning days of the vicious Trump administration. As we did in 1970, we mourn the loss of millions of our ancestors and the devastation of our land, water, and air. We condemn all acts of violence and terrorism perpetrated by all governments and organizations against innocent people worldwide. Since the invasion of Columbus and the rest of the Europeans, Native people have been virtually non-stop victims of terrorism. From the colonial period to the 21st century, this has entailed torture, massacres, systematic military occupations, and the forced removals of indigenous peoples from their ancestral homelands. Let us not forget that this country was founded on the ideology of white supremacy, the widespread practice of African slavery, and a policy of genocide and land theft. Let us not forget that under the pipelines, skyscrapers, mines, and the oil rigs lie the interned bones, sacred objects, and villages of our Native ancestors. On our program will be only Indigenous speakers. This is one day when we speak for ourselves without non-Native people, so-called experts, intervening to interpret and speak for us. Today, on liberated territory, we will correct the history of a country that continues to glorify butchers such as Christopher Columbus, that makes slave-owning presidents such as Washington and Jefferson into godlike figures, and even carves their faces into the sacred Black Hills of the Lakota. In 1970, very few people would have given any thought to the fact that Indigenous people of this hemisphere do not look upon the arrival of the European invaders as a reason to give thanks. Today, many thousands stand with us in spirit as we commemorate the 2020 National Day of Mourning. In the spirit of Crazy Horse, in the spirit of Metacom, in the spirit of Geronimo, above all, to all people who fight and struggle for real justice, we are not vanishing, we are not conquered, we are as strong as ever.
Sounding good. It's tested. Oh yeah, I can hear it.
Keep that lava on? You gotta taste it.
I got the lava. I already got it. There you go, Matilda.
Okay. That was Keisha Kimimilasha James. Yeah. My name is Matoi Monroe, and I'm the co-leader of United American Indians of New England. It's raining a little bit today. It may rain more, and it's so beautiful to see everyone who still came out today. Greetings to those of you who are here with us in Plymouth today for the 50th anniversary of National Day of Mourning. And we warmly welcome those of you who are watching the live stream, too. And we thank Sunny Singh and all the other technical people who have made this happen, because it's been really complicated, and they made it seem really easy. Here we are, deep in the heartland of colonialism. Here we are, at a place where great dying occurred, overlooking a harbor where Wampanoag, Nipmuc, Massachusetts, and other indigenous captives were shipped off as slaves. Let's take a moment to think about those who are no longer with us. Our elders leave us, and they take so much knowledge with them when they do. It makes us feel lonely to be without them. but we also feel our ancestors here beside us, holding us up today. We pray for those who cannot be here with us today, for all of the people in communities hit hard by COVID, especially Indigenous and Black and Latinx communities with much higher rates of hospitalizations and deaths. We think of all the Indigenous people throughout this hemisphere who are being swept away by this horrible disease, from British Columbia to Dineta to Brazil. As of yesterday, the hard-hit Navajo Nation has had more than 15,000 positive cases and 638 deaths. Many other communities are suffering tremendously. Our people all too often lack basic resources, clean water for washing, decent health care, and other things that would help to reduce the amount of sickness and death. But Indigenous people are largely trapped under governments that do not care about our future and fail to take the necessary steps to make sure we are all protective. When Native nations ask for government help, they may be sent body bags instead of much needed supplies. Or the bureaucrats want to fight over sending relief money to tribes. To the settler governments, the saying, "The only good Indian is a dead Indian," seems to remain true to this day. We think today of the many people and allies who are unable to be here with us. Juan and Rosalba, who normally do our opening ceremony, are staying in Maya homelands because of the difficulties in traveling during the pandemic. Munanam James, my co-leader, is not here today. He has been in the hospital for a few weeks, and I would ask for all of you to do a shout out to him right now so that he'll be able to hear it on the recording. Others are not here because they're in quarantine or at high risk or are caring for sick family members. This is a difficult year. The epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirits continues. Yesterday brought devastating news about a local missing Mashpee Wampanoag teen, Jalasia Finkley, whose body was believed to have been found in Florida. And today we offer our deepest condolences to her family and her community. We acknowledge the many struggles that all of you have carried here today. From the many efforts to stop pipelines and the Weymouth compressor station, to the ongoing work to free Puerto Rico, to the attempted desecration of sacred Mauna Kea by scientists who lack respect for Indigenous sacred places, to occupied Palestine. And we say loudly, here and now and forever, Black Lives Matter. Our speakers today will reflect some of the struggles that Indigenous peoples are leading and involved in. We begin with a speak out here on Coles Hill, then we'll march to Post Office Square for a brief rally and on down to Plymouth Rock where we'll have a final rally. Following that, there will be many pre-recorded messages to listen to from other struggles, and I'll tell you more about that later. Defending tribal sovereignty is certainly as much an issue today as it was at the original National Day of Mourning in 1970. Native nations continue to have their sovereignty and land rights denied and infringed upon, regardless of whether the tribal nations have treaties or not, and regardless of whether they have federal recognition or not. Both of the federally recognized tribes in this state, the Aquinnah and the Mashpee Wampanoag, have had their tribal sovereignty restricted and been denied the sovereign use of their own lands by settler governments. Earlier this year, the Trump administration, in an act of cruelty amidst the onset of COVID, attempted to disestablish the Mashpee Wampanoag Reservation. And these attempts are ongoing even in the final days of the reign of Trump. The U.S. government also continues to deny federal recognition to other tribes in the region, such as the Massachusetts and Nipmuc, among others. Nevertheless, they continue to strengthen cultures and political sovereignty with or without federal recognition. Of course, tribal sovereignty is not just being challenged in this region. In Southern California and Arizona, for instance, Trump's border wall has been desecrating the sacred sites of the Kumeyaay Nation, the Tohono O'odham people, and many others. It's also been dividing these indigenous communities because the U.S.-Mexico border cuts through their lands. The immigrant Pilgrim nation that is the United States has a short memory and is in denial of their own historical facts. This government is descended from the invaders who forcibly took our lands and resources from us, then denied us the use of our languages and cultures. Once again, we express our support for migrant communities targeted by ICE and ask the question, who's the illegal alien, Pilgrim? In the various discussions of so-called illegal immigrants, the settlers laud their own achievements, claiming that America is a nation of immigrants while ignoring the centuries of murder and violence perpetrated against Black and Native people by these same immigrants. We celebrate and applaud the tremendous efforts and victory of the indigenous majority in Bolivia, who were able to boot out the fascist, violent, US-backed government that was installed last year. The people have made it possible for Evo Morales and others to return to their homeland. And when he was driven out of Bolivia by the fascist militia, Evo Morales said, "I will return and I will be millions," and he meant it. We speak at a time of days of action sweeping across so-called Canada, from coast to coast, from the tiny house resistance in Gidimt'en and Wet'suwet'en to 6 nations of the Grand River to Mi'kmaq homeland. All around the world, indigenous people continue to defend and protect their lands. It's really important for those of us who live here in the U.S. to show our solidarity with others in struggle and to bring public awareness to all indigenous struggles and all acts of violence against indigenous peoples, not just the ones occurring in North America. We are all united in our fight against settler colonialism, and we must remember that what happens to one of us happens to all of us. The residential school days may be over, but the Indian Child Welfare Act, which should prevent our children from being stolen by non-Native people, continues to be under attack. If the Indian Child Welfare Act is repealed, we could return to the grim time when thousands upon thousands of Native children were taken from their homes to be adopted by white families. Already, huge numbers of our kids are put into foster care. This is one reason why we say the genocide of indigenous peoples is ongoing, not something that happened in the past. Although Trump will soon be gone, and of course everyone is happy about that, we will still not have anyone in the White House who's truly committed to working with indigenous people. The legacy will continue of underfunding programs, of denying our full rights to sovereignty, of supporting those who exploit the land rather than those who defend the land and water. We come together at a time when people are terrified about climate collapse and the future, and there is so much suffering already. I want to say that individual actions are not going to save us when corporations and the U.S. military account for 70% of the world's pollution. Promoting a narrative of individual responsibility is not going to save us. Hoping that capitalism will get kinder will not save us. The Green New Deal is not enough to save us. Only by listening to indigenous people and dismantling the system that puts profit before people will we be able to save the planet. Indigenous peoples have always been caretakers of the land, water, and the life thereon, despite intense efforts of settler governments to stop us from doing so. For generations, Indigenous people have been warning about climate disaster. It's not too late to achieve some climate justice on this planet, but Indigenous voices must be centered. One of many ways that people are working to center Indigenous voices is through education and legislation. Here in Massachusetts, we have a Massachusetts Indigenous legislative agenda that still has 3 bills before the state legislature. A bill to redesign the racist state flag and seal image, a bill to ban the use of Native American sports team mascots, and a bill to protect sacred Native heritage. There's a lot you can do to help us get those bills passed before the legislature adjourns in December. You can go to maindigenousagenda.org for more information. We will continue to demand the abolition of Columbus Day and the celebration of Indigenous Peoples Day across the state and across this country. We will continue to demand that all representations of white supremacy come down, including changing the name of Faneuil Hall in Boston, which is named after a slave trader. I end with talking about land back again, something on the lips of many Indigenous people. Treaties need to be honored. Lands need to be returned. There are ways to start the process of decolonizing the lands and to address climate collapse right now. First, ensure that no projects can go through any Indigenous nation's land without free, prior, and informed consent. Second, take all of the land that's currently being mismanaged by all the settler governments, such as the national parks or the Amazon rainforest, and let Indigenous nations manage that land. That would mean the restoration of millions of acres of our lands to us. It would also mean the end of the desecration of many sacred sites, such as the Black Hills or Sacred Oak Flat. Third, cancel all the leases, pipelines, mining, and corporate contracts, and let Indigenous people decide what development should continue and what should not. I don't want anyone who hears this to feel like you should give up, despite how hard 2020 has been. We can fight together for climate justice. We can take care of each other and do our best to mask up and reduce the spread of this plague. We can end settler colonialism. We can reclaim our lands. We are not vanishing. We are not conquered. We are as strong as ever. Okay, next we're going to hear from Samantha Maltese, who is a Quina Wampanoag and an Indigenous rights activist.
Onikisak, Natasawi Samantha Maltese, Nu Tomas Aquinaha Nat Nin Wampanoag. Hi, my name is Samantha Maltese, and I'm a member of the Wampanoag Nation of Aquinnah. Some of you may know me as the daughter of Chairwoman Cheryl Andrews Maltese. I actually have a first name. It is Samantha. I prefer to go by that. And it is so good to be here today to talk to you all. It's so good to be able to speak my language on this land. So many generations went by without being able to do that. And for me to be able to speak to you all today, to see your faces in the most crazy circumstances, it's a blessing. So I want to thank the Creator, thank all of you, and say Katapatanamu, thank you all. So I'm So I'm talking to you today a little bit about me and a little bit about the work that I do as an Indigenous rights activist. So I'll start when I was a kid. So when I was a kid, I grew up in the Massachusetts public school curriculum. The Massachusetts public school curriculum brought me to Plymouth as a Native child. They brought me here and they showed me the Plymouth Rock, the Mayflower replica, and brought me through Plymouth Plantation. Now, mind you, in the summertime, I was dancing on the powwow trail, but in the fall, I would come back to my classroom and make cardboard turkeys and fake headdresses in the fall. That transition for me was really difficult, and that's why I understand that words matter. The way we talk about Thanksgiving in our education system, it matters because it impacts Native students like me, Native students around the country, and everyone's idea of what Native people are today. That's where the initiative for my campaign, #MayflowersKill, comes from. I'm a consultant for an international Indigenous rights organization called Survival International. And you're probably wondering what the idea of the Mayflower history has to do with Indigenous rights. So I'll tell you, because I get this comment a lot on our posts. And we post content that is just quotes and stories from Native people to express how they feel about this history. And I get comments and I get DMs from certain individuals who ask me, you know, why can't you just leave the past in the past? Like, move on. It's been 400 years. And I love that question so much because it's just dripping with ignorance and fragility. Because the reason we can't leave the past in the past is for all the reasons we've said already on this stage today. Tribes are still fighting for tribal sovereignty. We're still fighting for our land back. We're still fighting for our culture and our language and our religion and our traditions so that we can come to places like this, speak to you all, and get our message out around the world so that we have visibility. We're still fighting that fight, and that's why we can't leave the past in the past. The history of the Mayflower is very real and very present. It's our present and our future, and it's impacting us every day. Contact and colonialism impacts us every single day. And it's not just here. It's not just Plymouth or Massachusetts or New England. It's impacting Indian country around the country. Tribes are fighting, like we said, for their self-determination, their sovereignty, in the courtroom, on the front lines, in front of pipelines that are cutting through traditional burial grounds and sacred sites, and we're fighting this fight in the classroom, asking for people to listen to us and center Indigenous voices in the education that we teach about Thanksgiving. #MayflowersKill is a movement more than it is just a campaign. And it's related to so much more than just history. It's related to so much more than just history because the past isn't in the past. It's happening still. Not only are tribes still fighting for our rights, but it's happening around the world. Modern day Mayflowers exist. Colonialism still exists, and tribes are still fighting in the most rural parts of the world. Places like the Andaman Islands, West Papua, in Africa and in the Amazon, there are tribes that are still facing the threat of extractive industries, of problematic governments that refuse to recognize the rights of the Indigenous people that claim to their lands. That's why this history is so important, and that's why we need to understand that we still must talk about it, because you can't just leave the past in the past. Across the Amazon, there are about 100 uncontacted tribes. There's uncontacted tribes there, the Andaman Islands and West Papua. These uncontacted tribes are struggling right now because the threat of COVID-19 is so severe there that the idea of a single evangelical missionary or miner could wipe out an entire group of people. That's an entire culture lost, an entire generation of humans who will cease to exist just because these governments and these people don't understand that according to the United Nations and every other human rights organization, tribes have the right to self-determination. They have the right to remain uncontacted. And that's why the Mayflower history is so relevant today. Because until we understand this history from an Indigenous perspective and listen to Native people when we say that it's still happening and that the impacts were tragic, it'll continue to happen everywhere in the world. And so I just want to remind you all to remember that history matters, language matters, and the past is not just part of the past. Katapatash, Thank you, everyone. Katapatanamu. There's an amazing lineup of events for today, so I'm just really grateful to be able to speak to you all. And yeah, aho.
We have one more, and then we're going to march. Because we're trying to move things along because of the weather, you know. So. Samantha, thank you so much. Every year at National Day of Mourning for decades, we have a message from Native political prisoner Leonard Peltier. Leonard Peltier is not only a political prisoner, but he's a father, grandfather, American Indian movement warrior, and artist who has been unjustly and harshly imprisoned since 1976 for a crime that he did not commit. The FBI falsified evidence and withheld exonerating evidence in order to imprison him under these frame-up charges, yet no court will give him a new trial or release him. If you don't know about his case, I urge you to educate yourself by going to whoisleonardpeltier.info and getting all the facts. Normally, when his statement is read, we have a blanket dance here on the Hill. This year, we're not going to have a blanket dance because of COVID, so I encourage all of you to go to the website of his defense committee and donate there as well. Again, it's whoisleonardpeltier.info. Burt Waters, a Wampanoag elder, usually reads the statement, but he's not able to be here today. So Charlie Naru has very kindly offered to read the statement for Leonard.
Daigwe, Mabrika, Dairi Chalinaru. Good day. Thank you for being here. My name is Chalinaru. I will be reading the statement from Mr. Pelletier. Before I do this, I also want to send out respects and my condolences to the family of the Wampanoag Nation for Jalasia. Just take 1 second to just think of them and bow your head and say a prayer in your head as they are suffering through this. Hahom Seneko Kakona. Greetings, my relatives, friends, loved ones, and supporters. First of all, I want to thank you for the privilege of being allowed to express my feelings about this day of mourning, as we call it, and Day of Thanksgiving, as the rest of the U.S. calls it. Sometimes I'm at a loss for words to express all the thoughts I have going on in my head after 45 years of imprisonment. I do want to express my appreciation for our ancestors before us who fought so hard that we would live today. I want to express my feelings of remembrance for the ones who were overpowered by the weapons of war coming from Europe and the pandemics they faced. Though we have been attacked by the invaders of Europe over and over in every way possible, and everything that has been done to destroy us, our culture and traditions, we still survived until today because we are an expression of the Creator's will and an expression of the Creator's truth. We are a manifestation of that truth, that all mankind should live within the boundaries of those laws. There is nothing that came from Europe that has made this portion of the earth a better place to live. But like all nature, we have survived, and nature continues to survive, though mankind is on the edge of destroying itself. The truths that our people spoke of, the need to live in harmony with each other, the Creator, the Mother Earth, and respect to one another's approach to spirituality when expressed by non-Indians, becomes a sensation around the world. We must continue to speak our truth, to live our truth, and to support one another, for their lives, our survival. The most powerful weapons that we can obtain is knowledge of truth and love for one another and the practice of that truth and love. We must unite and work together every chance we can and embrace all others who are of like mind and willing to work to correct this worldwide pandemic of greed and selfishness that has infected the whole earth and mankind. On this day of mourning, let us again remember our relatives before us who fought every challenge imaginable that we might survive, and in our prayers say, thanks for not giving up. Thanks for giving your lives as we might live. And to all of you out there, I want to say thanks for not giving up on me and my quest for freedom. May the Creator bless you in every way. Your brother always, in all ways. In the spirit of Crazy Horse and Resistance, Mitakuye Oyasing Doksha Leonard Pelletier. Thank you for giving me this honor to be able to read his words. Seneko Kakona Hahom Hanhan Katu.
Back in 1997, when we attempted to march, we were attacked by multiple police agencies and pepper sprayed. People dragged through the street by their hair. Elders pepper sprayed. 25 of us arrested. And as a result of that, we entered into a treaty with the town of Plymouth, which includes that we are allowed forever to march on National Day of Mourning without getting a permit and without getting their permission. And we're going to do that today because we do that every year and have been doing it for decades. And we do it because there are places in Plymouth that we want to go to and talk about. There are places here that we want to liberate by our presence. We want to liberate the streets and waterfront here in Plymouth, a place that serves as a fundamental symbol of the Pilgrim mythology, a place that profits off the suffering that was brought by the Pilgrims. So we're asking everyone now to form up behind the banners here, march with us. I will tell you, if you can't march far, the march will be at maximum 10 blocks today. It's not a very long march, but I wanted to let you know. Normally, we would have cars to put people in who can't walk the march, but we're not able to do that because of COVID, so we apologize for that. It just is what it is this year. So is everybody ready to march? Okay, let's do this.
Doing what I can because I
Habitakyapi, Nape Chuzapi, Chante Washte. I greet everyone with a traditional Lakota greeting, an open heart, and a handshake to all of our brothers, sisters, and relatives across the world who are tuning in to this year's National Day of Mourning. There's something about the weather. Last year, bushfires in Australia scorched more than 46 million acres, an area larger than Hungary and Portugal combined. Flames shot nearly half a mile in the air, killing 34 humans and more than 1 billion animals. In the United States, 8.2 million acres burned, and killing 37 people and displacing countless others. Swarms of locusts darkened the sky in parts of East Africa and West Asia, devouring plants and fruits as they tore through the land, leaving hardly a scrap of green. A single living swarm in Kenya amassed to the size 3 times larger than New York City. Tens of millions today face increased food insecurity. But the horsemen of the apocalypse can't ride alone without a plague. The coronavirus pandemic swept the planet, sharpening 2 competing visions of humanity, one based on science and caretaking, and the other on pure make-believe. The most powerful nation in the world chose the latter. And across the United States, Black, brown, indigenous, migrants, and poor people in general have bore the brunt of the Black.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
Bluetooth is often harder to get volume with. You got one more volume. street? Our street. I can't hear you. Whose street? Our street. Whose street? Our street. Whose street? Our street.
Del amor y guerreros de la paz, sí, no vamos a escondernos más. Somos guerreros del amor y guerreros de la paz, sí, no vamos a escondernos más.
So if you're just tuning in, we are now walking to Post Office Square, which is where the severed head of Metacom was placed on a pole for 25 years, and that's when the third day of Thanksgiving was celebrated. So this is Post Office Square ahead, right here. There will be a couple more speeches up here at Post Office Square. Then we're going to march down to Plymouth Pebble and have another set of speeches down at the tiny little Pebble.
Where do you want the interpreter? You know, there used to be a bench here and it's gone. If they stand like here, would that work? Yeah, but yeah. Would that work? Is that okay?
Sure, yes.
Oh, you're having this problem.
Yeah, log it up.
Yeah.
Jump in and turn it up, and I'll look at it. manners?
Yes. 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 We're going to put the interpreter down for visibility. Sonny, can you get it if I'm speaking, if we're speaking here and the interpreter's in the back of the truck, or do you need me to move over this way?
I can kind of get it.
You want me to move over?
No, if you're there, that'll work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of wanted to read it.
Yeah.
I don't have it.
Okay, we're going to go.
We're up here in. Can we do a sound test? It's coming through. Can everybody hear? All right. We're up here in Post Office Square in Plymouth. And I want you to see that there is a plaque here that our organization was able to get put up as a result of the settlement back in 1998. And it says, Metacomet, King Philip. After the Pilgrims' arrival, Native Americans in New England grew increasingly frustrated with the English settlers' abuse and treachery. Metacomet, known by the English as King Philip, a son of the Wampanoag sachem known as the Massasoit or Utomiquan, called upon all Native people to unite to defend their homelands against encroachment. The resulting King Philip's War, or Metacom's Rebellion, lasted from 1675 to 1676. Metacomet was murdered in Rhode Island in August 1676, and his body was quartered by the English. His head was impaled on a pike and was displayed here in Post Office Square for about 25 years to serve as a warning to Native people that they should not dare to rebel against the English. One of his hands was sent to Boston, and the other was sent to England. Metacomet's wife and son, along with the families of many of the Native combatants, were sold into slavery in the West Indies by the English victors. So this is a very heavy place, if you can imagine. And his spirit of resistance stays with us to this day. We have some friends visiting us from North Dakota who want to talk about something that they've been working on there. If they can please come up.
Tashkanitosha, Papa go gamiha, enitos, nuitaros, militaris, arikinaros, wano takashini, tokatni, wahuros. I've just greeted you in my traditional language, which is Nuita. How are you, my relatives? It is good to see you all. My name is Butterfly Woman. My English name is Angel Monez. I am Nuita Hiradza Sanesh from the MHA Nation. I've come from the plains to stand with you in solidarity today. I brought my sister.
Midapiapi, Chantewa Stage Yuzapi, Charnel Seaboy Imakiapi. Hello. I greet you all with a good heart. My name is Charnel Seaboy. I am a Dakota from the Spirit Lake Nation and Wapsinoyate. And I just want to thank you all for doing this. We are organizers for Rename Custer Park out of Bismarck, North Dakota, and we are doing the same efforts as you guys, and it is just really, it's really an honor to be here with you all. So thank you.
Okay. All right, we're gonna march to where the Mayflower replica is, and then on to Plymouth Rock. Students, let's put the banners up at the front and our drum up at the front. So let them go through the crowd so they can get up to the front, please.
I think so. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Give me one more second. There we go. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Is that the Z camera you're using?
It is, yeah.
How do you like that camera?
I love it. I actually bought 4 of them.
I guess they just came on my radar the other day. I was like, for $2,500, it's ridiculous.
That's for the S6. This is the E2, which is
Is this a Micro Four Thirds version? Yeah, so they have the Super 35. Hey, do you have an Instagram?
Is that?
Do you have an Instagram
Yes.
follow? What is it?
The word hate, the number 5, the word 6. Hate 5 6.
856.
The word hate, the number 5, the word 6.
So the word 6.
Yes.
And just the number 5.
Yeah, hate's 5 6.
856. Cool. I like, the sensor stabilization of this camera is amazing.
I really love it. I'm going to catch up with them. Good talking to you.
Good luck, yeah.
So if you're still tuned in, it is raining pretty hard right now. We are walking down towards the waterfront, which is where we're going to stop at the replica of the Mayflower. So this year, Plymouth, the town of Plymouth is actually going to have a big event to commemorate the 1620 arrival of the Pilgrims. But obviously, they canceled that. But as part of that ceremony, they had a replica Mayflower. So that is still here at the harbor, so we're going to take a look at that.
mic over here?
Yeah, working on it.
Thank you.
We're adding a light to the board.
Thank you so much.
Steve, you got the tape?
Zcam E2?
Zcam E2.
Yeah, I'm actually watching it from over right now.
Yeah. A little bit.
Coming through. I'm talking loud.
Good.
We good? We want people to hear. Okay. So, we're gonna thank you. Excellent. You want to go first? Okay. You want me to hold the mic? Are we all set, Sonny?
Yeah. Is someone doing it yourself?
Yes.
Got it, okay.
We all set?
Yep, we're good.
Thank you. Yeah. Because this is the 50th anniversary of National Day of Mourning, Keisha James is going to read the suppressed speech of her grandfather, Wamsutta Frank James, from 1970.
I speak to you as a man, a Wampanoag man. I am a proud man, proud of my ancestry, my accomplishments won by a strict parental direction. You must succeed. Your face is a different color in this small Cape Cod community. I am the product of poverty and discrimination from these two social and economic diseases. I and my brothers and sisters have painfully overcome, and to some extent we have earned the respect of our community. We are Indians first, but we are termed good citizens. Sometimes we are arrogant, but only because society has pressured us to be so. It is with mixed emotion that I stand here to share my thoughts. This is a time of celebration for you, celebrating an anniversary of a beginning for the white man in America, a time of looking back, of reflection. It is with a heavy heart that I look back upon what happened to my people. Even before the Pilgrims landed, it was a common practice for explorers to capture Indians, take them to Europe, and sell them as slaves for 220 shillings apiece. The Pilgrims had hardly explored the shores of Cape Cod for 4 days before they had robbed the graves of my ancestors and stolen their corn and beans. Mort's relation describes a searching party of 16 men. Mort goes on to say that this party took as much of the Indians' winter provisions as they were able to carry. Massasoit, the great sachem of the Wampanoag, knew these facts, yet he and his people welcomed and befriended the settlers of Plymouth Plantation. Perhaps he did this because his tribe had been depleted by an epidemic, or his knowledge of the harsh oncoming winter was the reason for his peaceful acceptance of these acts. This action by Massasoit was perhaps our biggest mistake. We, the Wampanoag, welcomed you, the white man, with open arms, little knowing that it was the beginning of the end, that before 50 years were to pass, the Wampanoag would no longer be a free people. What happened in those short 50 years? What has happened in the last 300 years? History gives us facts, and there were atrocities. There were broken promises, and most of these centered around land ownership. Among ourselves, we understood that there were boundaries, but never before had we had to deal with fences and stone walls. But the white man had a need to prove his worth by the amount of land that he owned. Only 10 years later, when the Puritans came, they treated the Wampanoag with even less kindness in converting the souls of the so-called savages. Although the Puritans were harsh to members of their own society, the Indian was pressed between stone slabs and hanged as quickly as any other witch. And so down through the years, there was record after record of Indian lands being taken and, in token, reservations set up for him upon which to live. The Indian, having been stripped of his power, could only stand by and watch while the white man took his land and used it for personal gain. This the Indian could not understand, for to him, land was survival, to farm, to hunt, to be enjoyed. It was not to be abused. We see incident after incident where the white man sought to tame the savage and convert him to the Christian ways of life. The early Pilgrim settlers led the Indian to believe that if he did not behave, they would dig up the ground and unleash the great epidemic again. The white man used the Indian's nautical skills and abilities. They let him be only a seaman, but never a captain. Time and time again, in the white man's society, we Indians have been termed low man on the totem pole. Has the Wampanoag really disappeared? There is still an aura of mystery. We know there was an epidemic that took many Indian lives. Some Wampanoags moved west and joined the Cherokee and Cheyenne. They were forced to move. Some even went north to Canada. Many Wampanoag put aside their Indian heritage and accepted the white man's way for their own survival. There are some Wampanoag who do not wish it known they are Indian for social or economic reasons. What happened to those Wampanoags who chose to remain and live among the early settlers? What kind of existence did they live as civilized people? True, living was not as complex as life today, but they dealt with the confusion and the change. Honesty, trust, concern, pride, and politics wove themselves in and out of the Wampanoag's daily living. Hence he was termed crafty, cunning, rapacious, and dirty. History wants us to believe that the Indian was a savage, illiterate, uncivilized animal. A history that was written by an organized, disciplined people to expose us as an unorganized and undisciplined entity. Two distinctly different cultures met. One thought they must control life. The other believed life was to be enjoyed because nature decreed it. Let us remember, the Indian is and was just as human as the white man. The Indian feels pain, gets hurt, and becomes defensive, has dreams, bears tragedy and failure, suffers from loneliness, needs to cry as well as laugh. He, too, is often misunderstood. The white man in the presence of the Indian is still mystified by his uncanny ability to make him feel uncomfortable. This may be the image the white man has created of the Indian. His savageness has boomeranged and isn't a mystery. It is fear, fear of the Indian's temperament. High on a hill, overlooking the famed Plymouth Rock, stands the statue of our great sachem, Massasoit. Massasoit has stood there many years in silence. We, the descendants of this great sachem, have been a silent people. The necessity of making a living in this materialistic society of the white man caused us to be silent. Today, I and many of my people are choosing to face the truth. We are Indians. Although time has drained our culture and our language is almost extinct, we, the Wampanoags, still walk the lands of Massachusetts. We may be fragmented, we may be confused. Many years have passed since we have been a people together. Our lands were invaded. We fought as hard to keep our land as you, the whites, did to take our land away from us. We were conquered. We became the American prisoners of war in many cases, and wards of the United States government until only recently. Our spirit refuses to die. Yesterday, we walked the woodland paths and sandy trails. Today, we must walk the macadam highways and roads. We are uniting. We're standing not in our wigwams, but in your concrete tent. We stand tall and proud, and before too many moons pass, we'll right the wrongs we have allowed to happen to us. We forfeited our country. Our lands have fallen into the hands of the aggressor. We have allowed the white man to keep us on our knees. What has happened cannot be changed, but today we must work towards a more humane America, a more Indian America, where men and nature once again are important, where the Indian values of honor, truth, and brotherhood prevail. You, the white man, are celebrating an anniversary. We, the Wampanoags, will help you celebrate in the concept of a new beginning. It was the beginning of a new life for the Pilgrims. Now, 350 years later, it is the beginning of a new determination for the original American, the American Indian. There are some factors concerning the Wampanoags and other Indians across this vast nation. We now have 350 years of experience living amongst the white man. We can now speak his language. We can now think as the white man thinks. We can now compete with him for the top jobs. We are being heard. We are now being listened to. The important point is that along with these necessities of everyday living, we still have the spirit. We still have the unique culture. We still have the will, and most important of all, the determination to remain as Indians. We are determined, and our presence here this evening
is living testimony that this is only the beginning of the American Indian, particularly the Wampanoag, to regain the position in this country that is rightfully ours.
Yeah, I know. We have to wait this now. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Keisha, for reading the suppressed speech of Wamsutta Frank James from 1970. We have visitors here today who are also people of the Sunrise, also people from the East. We have two sisters here from the Shinnecock warrior camp, and they're going to tell you what's going on in their territory.
Akway na tampa. That means hello, my friends. Akway na tampa. Kelly Natasuis. My name is Kelly. Dennis Nichipayawang. That means my last name is Dennis. Shinnecock Kwa Hasanamisko Nipmunk Nichishayawang. That means my nations are the Shinnecock Indian Nation and the Hasanamisko Nipmunk tribe here in Massachusetts. Shinnecock is on in New York in Long Island. We crossed the water to come to support our Wampanoag our neighbors and sisters and brothers. They're our relatives, our very close relatives. We have so many people in our families who are also Wampanoag and Narragansett and all over New England. We're all very much a family. We're honored to be here. We left this morning not knowing if we'd actually make it on the ferry to get here at 8:15. We went to a sunrise ceremony to mark the end of the sovereignty camp that we're doing on the Shinnecock tribe to call for the end to economic genocide of our people. Our local government in the state of New York have put so many roadblocks in our way to try to assert our sovereignty and our rights to be able to provide for our people. It's really been too long, and we hope that given the current situation that we're in, with everyone trying to find ways to survive, you know, we've seen on social media a little bit that this is kind of the best reenactment that they've ever seen of a Thanksgiving because of COVID-19 and what it's doing to our families. But this is something that we've lived through. And we can survive. And we can pull each other through. So keep wearing your masks, keep social distancing. We'll get through this. And we love everyone. And we're here to spread love. That is the love that we're here. That is what we're here to bring and to spread, not viruses. So again, yes, we're here with the Shinnecock Warrior Society, Shinnecock Warriors of the Sunrise is what it's actually called. And I'm going to hand it over to my cousin Tila, who is the leader of the camp there.
Hakame, my name is Tila. My native name is Sasrina. I am Shinnecock and Hasanamisko Nipmunk. I am an attorney along with my cousin Kelly, and we fight for Shinnecock sovereignty and the sovereignty of all Native people every day, and we stand in solidarity with Mashpee and all Native people of New England. Our voices are louder together, so thank you for giving us this opportunity.
The rain is beautiful. The rain is beautiful. It cleanses. Water is life. It reflects our tears as we mourn. The rain is beautiful. We're going to wrap up now. I want to let everybody know that within a few minutes of when we stop this live stream, our pre-recorded content will start. And I want to tell you about some of the people who sent us video messages, because there's a lot of important messages that we've received. We don't have them today, but we'll have them in the future from Bolivia. We don't have it today, but we'll have it in the future from North American Indian Center of Boston. But today we have a message from Melissa Harding Ferretti, who's the chair of the Herring Pond Wampanoag Tribe. A COVID-19 video called We Wear Because We Care, courtesy of Wade Fernandez from the Menominee Nation. A message from Skylar Williams at Six Nations of the Grand River talking about 1492 Land Back Lane. There'll be video messages from the Shinnecock Sovereignty Camp. Thank you. We'll have a message from the Council of Maya Elders, Consejo de Ancianos. We will have a message from Kukukwis Wokis, who is Mi'kmaq, and we'll be talking about the moderate livelihood fisheries struggle in their homelands. We have a triple threat from the Red Nation with Nick Estes, Elena Ortiz, and Savannah Ortiz. Sheldon Raymore, who will be talking about Two-Spirit people. Khaled Barakat, who's a Palestinian writer, talking about their struggle. Beverly Longid from Bayan, which is a Filipino struggle organization. Mukaro Agwe Bana, also known as Roberto Borrero, who is a Taino cacique. Matt Rem, who is going to be talking about defunding pipelines. A beautiful video with multiple communities speaking from the North American Megadam Resistance Alliance. Sarah Wunderlich, who is Oneida, and will talk about the death of her nephew, Jonathan Tubby, and Indigenous deaths in police custody. Lucy Pagarada Quesada, who's on the Honduran Resistance Council and is the U.S. and Canadian coordinator of the Libre Party from Honduras. And last but not least, there will also be Kuha Aheo, which is a video and song about the struggle to protect sacred Mauna Kea in Hawaii. We couldn't get every single thing we wanted, but we're so grateful to everyone who has sent us these video messages. And you'll be able to see it this afternoon, a few minutes after we're done here. And we'll also, Sunny Singh is going to put it together so that the live stream and the video messages will be able to play online at a later date so that everybody can see all the content. There's so much for everyone to learn from what's been talked about here today and what's contained in the video messages, so we urge everyone to do that. And again, we're so grateful to all the people who contributed. And listen, you all here are amazing. We're you know, it's just amazing all these years to keep coming here and people just show up at noon, you know, and they offer to help and they listen and they march with us, and no matter what the weather, sometimes it's bitter cold, sometimes it's a blizzard, sometimes it's raining, it doesn't matter. You all are here with us, and I know it took a lot of people couldn't be here this year, and I know it took a lot for people to get here, and we just are so grateful for that too. So we wish you health and we wish you safe travels, And we send you many safe hugs and much love. So, do you have somebody who's going to be with you and bring you food and stuff, by the way?
I'm okay.